Hey everyone, welcome back to Frame and Flow. In this two-part tutorial, we'll be creating an interactive light bulb using variables. In the first part, we'll set up the scene, design the UI, and apply materials to our objects. Then in the second part, we'll add interactivity to the light bulb by incorporating variables. So if you're ready, let's jump right in and start building our scene. Before we dive into creating our project from scratch, let's take a quick look at the completed project and see what elements we'll be working with. Here we have a light bulb object made up of three separate parts, along with a point light that will serve as light source. There's also a UI element with a few sections, as well as a simple background made of rectangles. In addition, we have a camera and a directional light, although the directional light has minimal effect on a scene. Now let's start building our project. First, we'll import our 3D model of the light bulb and drag it into Spline. With the object in place, we'll use the Spline library to apply a metal material to the bottom part of the light bulb, giving it a realistic metallic finish. Next, let's work on the middle section of the light bulb, which is plastic. We'll add a matte cap layer, select the first matte cap texture, and adjust the blending mode to overlay. This completes the middle section. Moving on to the top part of the light bulb, we'll need a more complex material since it will have three distinct states. In the completed project, you'll see the top part has different states: a warmer color, a cool color, and an option to turn off. To create this, we'll layer the materials. First, we'll turn off the color layer for now and change the color of the first layer to a warm tone. To make the color stand out, we'll need to adjust our scene by first creating a darker background. To reduce the brightness of the scene, let's change the ambient light to around 0.1 and adjust the directional light similarly. Then we'll enable effects and add bloom to get the desired glow effect from our light. Now that the scene looks closer to the final result, let's return to the light bulb and add more layers. We'll add a Fresnel layer to create an edge with a slightly darker color for added detail. This completes the first part of the material. We'll repeat this process for the cooler color by duplicating the color layer and adjusting it to a cooler tone. We'll also duplicate the Fresnel effect and modify it to match the cooler shade. Later, we'll add variables to toggle these colors, but for now, let's leave them as they are. For the base or off state of the light bulb, we'll add a white layer and set up the lighting to give it a shaded look. One final adjustment is to reduce the opacity of the matte cap on the plastic layer to around 40%, as it's now very dark after adjusting the scene lighting. Next, let's add a point light. From the bottom of the toolbar, select Point Light, position it near the top of the light bulb, and adjust the settings by increasing intensity and setting the shadow resolution to high, with a radius around 8,000. If there's no visible change, try restarting the program, as this can resolve shadow issues. With our background appearing a bit too bright, let's go to its material settings and adjust it to a slightly darker shade. Now we'll temporarily toggle off some layers to highlight the warm color for visual clarity. With the light bulb complete, we can move on to creating the UI. We'll start by creating the base of the UI with a rectangle, rounding its corners slightly, adding some extrusion, and giving it a bevel. In the Material tab, we'll turn off the lighting layer, change the color layer to depth, and set it to linear. Then we'll adjust the direction and scale of the depth layer to fit the rectangle. We can experiment with the color to find the right shade and set the blending type to smooth. Next, we'll add a glass layer and reduce the opacity of the depth layer to about 50%. The default settings for the glass layer work well, so we'll leave them as they are. Finally, we'll add a matte cap layer. Select the first option and switch the blending mode to screen. For a more refined look, we can slightly adjust the colors of the depth layer. Now let's create our text elements, starting with controller and aligning it in the center. We'll set the font weight to black and the color to white. Turn off the lighting layer since it's not needed, and adjust the bounding box size to fit the text. In our finished project, you'll see it includes 3 text elements. Let's duplicate the text, move it down, rename it, and change the font weight to medium. Adjust the size to about 8 and add some spacing for visual balance. Next, duplicate the color text, move it down, and change the content to rotation. Now let's create the slider bar. Begin by drawing a rectangle, adjusting the X size to 100 and reducing the Y size. Add some rounding to the rectangle's corners to give it a smoother look. In the material section, turn off the lighting layer, then change the color layer to a gradient. Set up the gradient colors to transition from a warm tone to a cool tone, and change the blending to smooth. Now duplicate this rectangle, move it down, and adjust the colors to black and white to create the rotation bar. Next, let's create the on-off button. First, duplicate the existing rectangle, move it up, and adjust its size. Then, let's change the gradient on this duplicated rectangle to match the final design. Move the gradient handles closer to the center, setting one side to blue and the other side to purple. Add a couple more gradient handles on each side to create a lighter blend towards each end. Now, we'll add text for the on-off button. Let's create another text element. Type on, center it, then in the materials section, turn off the lighting layer and set the color to white. Reduce font size as needed, and adjust the bounding box. Now, duplicate the text, move it to the right, and change it to off. With this, the on-off button is complete. For the switch button, duplicate the original rectangle again, move it slightly forward, and add a small amount of extrusion. Position it in front of the base rectangle, then adjust its size. In the material settings, remove 2 gradient handles, set the colors to black and white, and adjust the rotation. This completes our on-off button setup. Next, let's create the call to action button. Start by duplicating one of the rectangles, then adjust its size to fit your design. Now go to the material settings and modify the colors as desired. With that, the basic button is ready. Now we need to add text to it. You can write something like "Watch the tutorial" or any other label you prefer. Afterward, adjust the text size to ensure it fits well within the button and fine-tune the material. Now, for the final steps, we need to add the slider handle. Start by creating a circle shape and placing it at the beginning of the bar. Next, let's set up a material for this circle by adding an outline layer first. Set the outline color to white, and for the main color, use a gradient. Adjust the gradient colors to something like purple and blue. This completes the slider handle. Duplicate it for use with the rotation bar as well. And with that, our UI elements are ready. That brings us to the end of the first part of the tutorial. In the next part, we'll bring everything to life by adding interactivity to the light bulb using variables. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next one.